Good evening. Today we are making a tune with the lowest viscosity possible. Some describe it as free-flowing football. Some describe it as assets easily converted into cash. It is, of course, Liquid. There we have it. Let's have a little listen from the beginning and see what's going on.
Thought I found a way, yeah. But you never go away. So I guess I gotta stay now. Oh, I hope someday I'll make it. Oh no, there, even if it takes all night. Oh, 100 years, need a place to hide. But I can't find one there. Wanna feel alive outside. I can't find my fear. Isn't lovely? Heart me glass, my mind I'm stone. Tell pieces, skin and bone.
Very nice. So we start off with the intro. And the main thing that's carrying this song is this guitar loop. It is a sample that I found, but I did melodyne it and bounce it down. So this is how you would melodyne a guitar loop like this. So here we have all of the individual notes being played. If you highlight all of them and make sure it's on polyphonic, then you get all of the individual notes. So now we can change these notes as we wish. So if you've got a sample that doesn't quite fit, I would always recommend chucking it into Melodyne and just seeing what you can do with it, because you can make songs so much better if you get the harmony and the music right. And then the intro, we're starting off with a classic close tap, a long drum room on there. I've got all of the drums being sent to a drum room, and it's much louder and the decay time is much longer in this intro, just to give it a little bit of atmosphere.
Thought I found a way, yeah. But you never go away. So I guess I gotta stay now. Oh, I hope someday I'll make it.
So into the pre, we drop out all those guitars and we're playing the same chords as these guitars are playing. So we're in F sharp minor and we're playing F sharp minor as the first chord, E major as the second, D major as the third, and then back to the A major. Quite a good thing to do is, if you're struggling to get chords sounding right in your song, you can collapse all of the notes that are in your piano roll just to the scale. So as long as you've got your key selected up here, so we're in F sharp minor here, and you press scale, and it's only going to show you the notes in the scale. So it means you can play around with adding little notes here and there that maybe you wouldn't otherwise have done. So here we've got pretty basic triads with the third an octave up. And apart from these two notes are just little accents. So you could try all manner of different notes on these chords. Try one up there. So just having the piano roll collapse to the key makes it so much easier. Just throw in any kind of notes, and quite often you'll land on something that maybe you wouldn't have done if you didn't know that all of these notes are in the scale. So it's much easier to create interesting chords in that sense. So that is a Nexus patch, hybrid strings, and then we've got a piano underneath doing the exact same notes, and that is a Nexus brilliant piano wide. It's got a little bit of high cut, bit of compression, OTT, and a reverb. And just to introduce into this next section, there's quite a nice impact there as well. So that really gives it a bit of a cinematic feel, because the strings and the pianos has a bit of a Hans Zimmer vibe to it. Gives it that real epic movie soundtrack kind of vibe. And then we've got a Reese coming in there as well. So two saws, both an octave down, and one is 7 semitones higher. So without that 7 semitones. And with. So it's adding the fifth, so it gives it a bit more of an emotional kind of feel to it. So with all these strings, I thought it sort of added to that vibe quite nicely. And we got 7 unison on the second oscillator, and the LFO one is affecting this cutoff. So it's just opening up every time the envelope is being triggered. And then we've got some distortion on there. Just gives it a tiny bit of that sizzle, bit of compression, bit of chorus, and a bit of reverb on there. Bit unusual for a Reese, but I thought it added a nice ambiance. And because it is a bass, I've taken out a hell of a lot of the low end from that reverb as well. And very gradually, we're bringing in the kick pattern, the drum and bass kick pattern, and then that cutoff is slowly opening as that time goes on. There's only a tiny bit being let through. I don't want it to be too prominent because it's quite a moment. I didn't want to sort of overshadow it with too many drums going on. Then we come to the build. We've got the kick doing the 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4, and then doubling, and then you can see again we're sort of changing some of the automation here. So I've taken the gain down. Instead of it being too static and exactly the same level the whole way through, I just wanted to make it a little bit of a wave, so it's going up a little bit and then it's coming down a little bit again. And as we're going through, we're letting more of the highs through as time goes on and taking out more of the lows as time goes on, as we can see here. So it just removes the low end before the drop. So we've got a little bit more impact going on when the drop comes. And we're doing a very similar thing on this Reese, more of a low cut in this build, and then we're taking the lows out even more as we're progressing into the drop. So we have the claps are slowly coming in as well. Similar thing, we've got a high cut, and then we're just opening the high cut as the build goes on, just to increase that tension. And then we've got some hats. Similar thing again, high cut, and then we're bringing some more of the highs in. And the same again, instead of it being just a straight line going from down to up like this, it gives it a little bit more movement. If you just make it not such a straight line, almost it gives the automation a sort of humanized feel, which it can sometimes feel a little bit static if it's just straight lines going from point A to point B in a linear fashion. So give it a little bit of a journey as it's going through. Gives a little bit of interest to the ear. And then we've got a little lead just to add a different melodic feel into the build so we know something's coming. So So there's a couple of saws. LFO1 is affecting the levels of both the oscillators. Just a tiny bit, so the volume sort of wobbles as it's being played. And then we've got a heavy distortion on that. So it just makes it sound a little bit less buzzy, a little bit more gritty. And then to add a little bit more movement as well, we've got the pitch bend leading into that first note and then into the second one here. And also at the same time we've got the portamento on 151. So there's a lot of movement going on. Even in a fairly uninteresting couple of notes, just the movement really helps it gather a little bit more interest. Nice. And then with the vocal, I have taken the reverb down and the delay down as we're going into the drop. So as we're getting closer to the drop, the vocal is becoming more and more dry. Life outside, I can't find my fear. And then there's just a little bit of a kick of the reverb as we've got this little space here, just to open it up again so we sort of know that there's something coming next. First way that we're getting into the drop is something I love doing, is putting a reverse kick right before your first kick in the drop. Makes that first hit just sound lovely. So without that, and with, it's very subtle, but it gives a hell of a lot of energy. So we're just using the exact same kick that we're using in the drop there, and we've just reversed it. So very typical drum and bass pattern. So this is our MIDI for the kick. I noticed in Liquid drum and bass, a lot of the times they use very short, snappy claps. The length of the clap doesn't actually go on for very long at all. So I've got two here that are pretty short. We've got the drum room that's making it appear longer. So without the drum room, the actual samples sound like this. So super short and snappy. And that drum room that I'm using is Ableton's drum room. And I've automated the decay from the intro when I said it was longer. So just having all of the tops and not the kick are all being sent to that drum room. So the hats, I was referencing Goddard. What it sounded like is he had two separate hats. One that was a little bit shorter, maybe even a shaker, and then one hat sort of alternating between each other. So this is one of them. And then this is the other. And they're both playing in between each other. So just in context with the kick and the snare. So instead of one hat playing those notes one after the other, you're alternating between two. So it gives it a real human vibe to it. And with both of them as well, I've put a Logic Swing 52 on there. It gives it a little bit more of a shuffle, makes it feel a little less straight. And then with this hat here, I've got this audio FX rack that is set up, so I've got an LFO that's affecting a few of these parameters here. So in this instance, it's affecting the gain of this shelf. So it just gives it a little bit more of a human feel. So without that hat shuffle, and with, it's more of a so it's effectively doing the same thing as if you were to take the velocity down of these three and then leave the one higher velocity. So it's effectively doing the same thing. But rather than do that every time, I have made this so it gives a similar feel, so I can just whack that onto the hats and not have to go into the velocity and do it every single time. I won't explain exactly how to set it up because it does take a while, but I'm sure I'll do a video on how we can do that. And then we've got hat loop in here. Gives it a nice little skip to it. And then in the second half of the drop, I've got this noisier crash ride cymbal thing. just to pick up the energy in the second half of that drop. And then we're hitting a crash at the start of both of the sections of the drop. And we brought the guitars back in, really nice rhythm to it, so it really helps keep the rhythm up during the drop. I've noticed in liquid drum and bass there's not always an awful lot going on, so it really needs to be carried by the melodies particularly. So having this guitar in gives the drop a real nice dimension. And just going into this next section of the drop, got a little sort of breakbeat skip going on. So for these basses, we've got a main Reese, we've got a little Reese fill, and we've got a stab. So all of them together. So this main Reese, 2 analog dB sines. They're both at 16 unison, and the thing that helps really create the movement is the difference in these 2 detunes. So they're ever so slightly detuned, and the wavetable position is slightly off as well. So it means they're not all playing at the same time, they're sort of wobbling in between each other. It's a similar thing that you could do if you changed the fine tuning either side, plus or minus. And we've just got a distortion that's hitting pretty hard on that. And then a bit of EQ, bit of compression. And then another thing to help the movement as well, ever so slightly changing the pitch bend. The pitch bend gives it a bit of movement, because as I said, there's not loads going on with the bass especially. So to just have those movements in the gaps really helps. So here we've got the Reese is pitch bending ever so slightly here. And then when this Reese fill comes in, we're not pitch bending because we've got something else that's adding to the ear candy here. So we're only doing it here because there's nothing else really happening. So we've got 2 bits of interest going on. One is the pitch bend of the main Reese, and then while the main Reese is static, we've got the Reese fill, which is doing the movement. So this Reese fill, we're taking out a hell of a lot of those lows. Basic CJW. LFO tool is affecting the wave position. So it just gives it that wobble as the sound's going on. And then same again, distortion's being hit really hard. So that's what's giving it pretty much all the character in that sound. We've got a little bit of hyper going on, a bit of phaser, chorus, delay. And you notice that even though we're taking out the low end, I've kept the sub in because that sub is being hit through this distortion. So if you don't have the sub, you're not going to be able to hit the distortion that hard. So with the sub on. So even though after all of those effects in Serum, we're taking out the low end, having that sub in before we take out the lows with the EQ still makes a massive difference to the sound. So that is why we still have the sub in there. And we're doing a similar thing. We are changing the pitch bend as we're going into that sound. And we are opening the filter cutoff of this last one here. So again, we're slightly changing the sound from here to here with that filter cutoff. And we've taken it up into a different octave. So we're playing a different note as well. But having it in a different octave just gives it a really different tonality. This stab almost reminds me of a trap stab. It looks fairly complicated, but actually this LFO is just affecting almost all of these parameters here. So that's what's giving it the wham sound. Brown. So we've not got the attack directly on 0, just a little bit of a slower attack, but it still has that real snappiness. So it still gives it that energy. So we've got sine wave, and then FFT adds 2. And then similar again, these are being affected by that same LFO as well. And then distortion is doing a hell of a lot of that. So distortion on these sounds are always going to grit it up a lot. So if you notice on that and the last patch I showed, they were both on 100% drive, 100% wet as well. So that's where a lot of the grittiness is coming from those sounds. And we've got quite a big reverb on there as well, over 50%. And these stabs are just playing the exact same notes as the Reese. So the second half of the drop just added a few little synths just to level it up a little bit. So if I just play these synths with the guitar. It's easy to add a load of stuff into any kind of production. When I feel like it works best is when they can all be played together and they don't get in each other's way. So these three sound like a cohesive unit. So they're not clashing with each other. They're sort of just like little bits of ear candy that you probably wouldn't even notice, but I just add in something to the harmony of the song. So this one here is doing the same rhythm effectively as the guitar. And because it's almost holding on one note throughout the whole thing, apart from one is changing every now and then, it doesn't get in the way of that guitar melody too much. So this is a vocal, I think, that I chopped up. And then stuck an LFO tool on there. So it's just doing eighths. So without that. So it's doing the same rhythm as these hats. And then we've got an OTT Saturn erosion just to crunch it up a little bit. And this bit, the vocal in the post here, I've just taken from the intro of the song. So it sounded lovely. I stretched it a little bit and it just gave that real liquidy feel to it. And there we go, Liquid, changing the world, taking over the world. We need it to survive. Hopefully it will be here forever. Thank you, and good day.